Hello everyone, my name is Tyler Murray, and today I'm going to break down showmanship, and hopefully you'll find this educational and informal, and you can share that with kids in your club, your family, or your county. Brandy Powell is going to assist me with this, and she's going to do some more specific kind of identifications later on, but right now I'm going to just kind of give you a generalization with how the do's and the don'ts of showmanship. Obviously, it's important to acknowledge the judge, shake his hand. It's professional. Maintaining eye contact is key. That should be the most important thing. Being confident with your answers and being honest. I'm going to get this bird out. I'm not going to get this bird out of the cage until the judge asks me. So keep that in mind. Don't go ahead. Don't just assume that you want to get the bird out without the judge asking and start going through the rhythm and the motions without being prompted. Because sometimes you can get windy and lengthy in your explanations, and you might lose the judge, especially if you're not thorough and keep a good track on where you started and where you finish. So right now I'm going to get the bird out. I open the cage. I'm going to securely grab this bird with my left hand. You noticed when I pulled him out that I made sure the bird's wings were secured against him, and I had a strong hold the whole time and maintained. Now it's also important to shut the cage door behind you. Just don't forget that. Okay, now as you can see how I'm holding this bird, I have my two middle fingers between the bird's legs with my pinky on the outside and my index finger on the outside, with my thumb holding down the wing and my pinky holding down the other wing. This is gonna secure the bird, and that makes the bird feel comfortable, so he's gonna cooperate a little bit better. Obviously, you should work with your chicken to make sure that it's used to being handled this way, okay? So, the first thing is when the judge asks you, tell me about your chicken. It's nice to know that your chicken has a name and he's loved, but it's more important to know if you know the history of your breed. So when I ask you, if a judge would ask you, tell me about your chicken, give him some breed information, some history. Tell him what kind of breed it is and the variety or the color, and what class it shows in accordance to the American Standard of Perfection. Obviously, this is a Bantam Light Brahma cockerel. So this bird would show in the featherleg class, okay? You can go into, everybody's gonna have a different bird for showmanship, so everything's gonna vary. But go into breed information, give them some history, when it was admitted to the standard, what's the purpose of it, being a dual purpose breed or a meat breed or an egg breed, and knowing the class that it shows in. This being a Brahma, Bantam Brahma, shows in the featherleg class, and if it was a large fowl, it would show in the Asiatic class. Obviously, again, everybody's going to have a different chicken, so that answer is going to vary. The next thing is when a judge asks you to identify parts. It's important to keep track and know where you are in the bird, so it's nice to have a system. Maybe you like to start at the front, maybe you like to start at the back, but the important thing is staying on track and keeping a motion. So I like to start at the head, work my way across the top and underneath, and that way I finish back at the same spot where I started. So, obviously, start with the head, and when you want to display the bird, it's important to maintain a strong hand on the bird at all times. So when I display this bird's head, it's as simple as this. Bringing that bird to between you and the judge, the same way with any market animal, you want to keep the specimen between you and the judge, not obstructing the view of the bird. So, I start here at the head. I'm going to have Brandy give some more specific parts. I'm just going to show you the generalization. So I'm going to start at the head. Okay, then I'm going to work my way from the beak to the comb, around the eye, I'll start on this side, around the head. So you can start here and you go to the wattles, and the earlobes, the eyes, back to the comb, or however you feel comfortable, whatever works for you, but just nice to keep a circular motion and throughout the bird. It keeps you on track, so you don't lose where you're at or forget. And then I'm going to move across the top. I'm going to go from the head toward the back. So obviously naming the parts in between, point A and point B. And I'm going to go from point B to C. So I'm going to go across the top and naming parts from start to midpoint. And in between those are the wings. Now when you display the wings, it's very, very important to keep the bird between you and the judge, not obstructing the view. So when you display the wings, you want to grab that bird at that shoulder, at that joint, okay? And when you display that wing, it's very simple. If he asks you to display the other wing, you always make sure that you switch hands because that keeps the bird in front of you and the judge, and it also keeps the bird safely so you're not reaching over it or around it or underneath it or making it uncomfortable for you or the bird. So you do the same on the other side. Now that I've done that, I'm going to move back into behind the wing where the saddle feathers are and start my progression again. Obviously, we have main tail feathers here. We're going to move in. That's about the midway point. This is point C. We're going to move to the back area and underneath. And this is the simplest way to display feet. You don't have to cradle it like a baby. It's not a baby. It's a chicken. Don't cradle it because it's very uncomfortable for the bird. It's not a normal position. So, displaying the tail is very simple. You just tilt the bird towards you up in an upright, tilt the tail up in an upright motion with the bird's head tipping lower at your stomach area. And then you're gonna move on to the feet. Now once you get past the feet, you're gonna move to the front side and you're gonna show the front side of the legs and move up into the hock joint and into the thigh, and then you can work your way through the lower abdomen, into the breast, into the upper abdomen. And then you will find yourself back to the head, naming parts in that order. When I'm done with this bird, it's very important, whenever you handle this chicken, any chicken, it's very important that you take it head first out of the cage, you put it head first in the cage, and it's important to hand it to the judge head first, and when the judge hands it back to you, he will hand it back to you head first. So I'm at this point, when I'm done with my explanation and I'm ready to put the bird back in its pin, I'm going to make sure that I put it back in head first. And also, I want to make sure that this bird is on display at its best potential. So I don't want to just throw it back in the cage. I want to make sure that this bird is presented as well as it can be. So I'm going to take a second to prep that bird and pose that bird so that the bird's going to look the best that it can. Obviously, when you're handling them, sometimes feathers can get ruffled or whatever, but like I said, you always want to make sure that the bird is on its best display, because showmanship is your knowledge, but it's also how you present that bird. Not that it's the best bird, but it's how it's presented. Cleanliness and condition is all part of that, whether you know what you're doing in showmanship. So the next thing that we're gonna talk about, aside from parts identification, knowing your disqualifications and your defects. Knowing if you have a bird before you even leave the barn, whether or not it's going to hinder you from being in competition or whether it's going to affect your placings. Knowing the difference between disqualifications and defects is very, very important, because a lot of times you might think that a crooked toe is a disqualification because it's not normal, but it's really a simple half a point to a point cut in the grand scheme of things, which is minimal. So knowing parasites, knowing diseases, those are also important things. Obviously, certain diseases have different signs and symptoms, as well as parasites. External parasites are easily visible, like lice and mites. So those things are easy to see with the eye. You can't see internal parasites, so you have to know and pay attention to how your birds react every day, and that's where proper husbandry, animal husbandry is a key important role, not just throwing feed and water to them and letting them go. So take an extra 5 minutes with your chore time to know that and be able to identify that when a bird's not acting normal. Another thing with showmanship I had kind of mentioned is nutrition. Knowing your feed, knowing what your bird is consuming and what's in that feed is important as well. The typical answer is Tractor Supply chicken feed. Well, Tractor Supply alone sells many different kinds of chicken feed, but is that feed right for your bird? So it's important to know what that bird is consuming, and not just in feed, but also in water. That water is the most important nutrient. And so it's important that that bird is getting a fresh, clean source of water every day. Now, it's okay to put electrolytes or vitamins in that, or if an occasional chorid for treatment for anything, whether it's a preventative or a treatment level, it's okay, but know what you're putting in there. Don't just do it because that's what they tell you to do. Know the proper levels, the dosages, and make sure that that's a fresh source. Hot days especially, it's fair time, so it doesn't take long for that water to get stagnant, especially when you put additives in that water. So hopefully you have a general idea and some understanding with what I talked about. I'm gonna have Brandy give you some more specific answers to kind of put that idea into motion, put these pieces into motion, so that you might understand a little bit better on what would work best for you with your system. And we're gonna try that here. So bear with us, and we'll be right back.